I've been putting together with help of administration. We have put the first draft of the 23-24 budget as well as an estimate for where we think we may end up for 22-23, which is the current school year. So this is the typical budget projection that is presented to the board, but again, the most updated with actual kind of where the budget could land. So for 22-23, just kind of covering where we are as of right now. As you can see, and I'll go over a more general view, and I'll point out a couple things as we go through the individual revenues and expenditures, but just as kind of a general view here at first. As far as revenue, we budgeted revenues of almost $58 million, and we are looking or estimating revenues of almost $60 million for 22-23, which certainly is what is kind of closing the gap of our budget deficit that we projected for or passed for 22-23 of just almost $3.4 million. I can tell you the big areas of revenue that are coming in kind of over projection is one of the big ones is interest revenue. We are looking at probably earning over $300,000 in interest this year, and it's certainly because the feds, since we passed our budget, have consistently increased the interest rate, which was not kind of what we thought or had projected when we passed our budget in the spring. So we have seen significant interest revenue. We've been trying to do different things this year as far as investing in just treasury bills, short term, trying to get the highest interest rate possible while still maintaining good cash flow and not locking anything up into long term. I think the other important kind of big area of interest difference is our basic ed subsidy. At the time we passed our budget in early June, the state still hadn't passed their budget. We did include an increase of around $500,000 in our estimated basic ed, an increase where we actually received almost $1 million. So that made up a big difference as to why our revenue is coming in over budget. And the same was kind of with special ed as well. We budgeted for an increase, but we received more than we had budgeted for. Again, the state had not passed their budget as of when we passed ours in early June. So really, those are the big areas of where kind of revenue is different than what we projected, but making up that almost $2 million difference, which pretty much closed our budget gap for 22-23. As you can see, expenditures for 22-23, we estimated those at almost $61.4 million, and they're coming in at $60.2 million. So they are falling pretty much right in line. Our expenditures this year. The one big difference that hasn't happened yet, and the board can still vote to do this, even though right now we're projecting basically a break even, is last year the board voted to budget for a $1 million transfer from the general fund to capital reserve. Now, because we're pretty much breaking even this year, I have not included that as part of the expenditures. The board could still vote to do that if you so choose. We can wait till we get better final numbers. But my recommendation, just looking forward to the next couple of years, you as a board are going to need as much fund balance as you can get based on the projections that are here for the next 4 years. So at this point, I would not recommend doing any type of transfer for this current year, even if you do come out a little bit of ahead, just because of your need for fund balance. But that's a vote again. We can still take.
But we can transfer any time we want. We can transfer at the end of this year. We can transfer in the middle of next year.
You can, as long.
Yeah. There's no drop-in date on the transfer.
No, as long as you got to stay within budget. So you can't do a transfer that's going to take you out over budget. So typically that's why we've been doing it at the end of the year to kind of see what we have remaining or if we're going to fall within budget. So really, as far as the expenditures goes, again, everything is pretty much coming within budget. Nothing really jumped out as me as far as 22-23. Is there any questions on the estimate? As of right now, $60 million, I still call break even, looking at around a deficit of $140,000 to end 22-23. And we will go into a lot more. We just kind of finished this up last week. So my hope is in April at Audit and Finance is to really kind of delve in a little bit more into the numbers themselves.
And the line 800, that budgetary reserve, that holds fast on line 102, correct? That's always been in there, right?
We have slowly built it up to $250,000 that we started budgeting. That is really just, we hold that in our budget at the beginning of every year in case something unpredicted comes up. We have a little bit of cushion. If we don't need it, it's not something that we have to spend.
Charter school payments continue to go up.
Charter school, yes, payments are significantly increased.
What line is that?
Line 73 on the expenditure side. So on the last page, line 73.
You are Walter's here. Hi, Walter. So you are expecting our insurance bids for the district come due in June, correct?
We renew
In June.
In June, yes.
So do you plan to set that out to several people?
We typically fill out applications for, there's really only 3 or 4 insurance companies who actually provide insurance. There are different brokers who you can go through, but there are really only 3 or 4, and we typically send applications to the 3 or 4 insurance companies who do business in the state of Pennsylvania. So I can tell you that is expected to increase. Regardless of which insurance company you're with at this point, we're being told the way they appraise properties and the values that they're placing on them is increasing, which directly drives the amount of insurance that you pay for. And what I've heard from multiple people is at least a 20% increase in insurance next year.
How much?
20%.
You're in the
So
wrong
for us,
business.
we do roughly around 180,000. So we're probably talking, $20,000-$25,000 increase in insurance next year.
Well, then I think we ought to get as many people to bid as we can to see what happens here.
And we do. We typically filling out 2 or 3 applications for the companies who do business in the state of Pennsylvania.
So when we're talking about the charter school tuition going up, is it because they're charging more, or is it because more of our students are going to them?
I would say they both play a role, sir, but I would say the biggest increase is because of our number of kids attending charter schools. There's always been a slight increase every year, but the biggest, almost $200,000 from this year to last year is because of an increased amount of kids attending charter school.
How many kids are we talking about total?
Must be 20, 18, 20.
Right now, I think we have right around 70 or 80 kids
Oh, my.
who are attending
When you say
outside
charter, you really mean cyber.
cyber
yeah.
charter schools.
And how many are outside placement in terms of your department?
We have about, I'd say it's somewhere around 10, 12 students that attend outside placements, whether it be Children's Institute, DePaul, News Story, Presley. We have 2 at Presley Ridge.
And is that, go ahead.
Do we still have kids going to Penn's Manor, was it, or purchase
No.
loan?
No,
'Cause
no,
we
we-
hired a teacher so we could pull
yeah,
those back. We got
those
them all
students are all
back.
back with us.
So we don't have any outside of our district, like Homer Center or any of those.
That's correct.
Okay.
We do have students that attend the autistic support classroom that's run by the IU, but at the junior high and senior high, and they're located in our buildings.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're known as outside placement tuition payments in 562 school charters. And
Yeah,
well, they've
so-
all gone up, gee. So I guess the state figures they gave us big subsidies, so that should count towards what we're paying.
Which is probably more fallout from the pandemic.
Yeah, and we certainly, especially in the cyber charter schools, saw a significant increase during COVID. And typically, once those kids leave,
It's hard
you
to-
don't get them back. It's hard to get them back. So
That's part of it. The other thing is COVID allowed them to change their business model a little bit. We used to be able to compete because everything was asynchronous.
Mhm.
And now certain cyber charter schools are offering live synchronous instruction as well, which makes it more difficult for us to compete because it makes it, that much more expensive for us to provide that service.
Oh, I thought that was going to get ironed out with the state legislature, that we would be, so that's done. We're not going, I'd read that. So we're not going to be able to compete on that level of offering live synchronous.
We can compete, we just have to staff it.
we can compete. Our problem,
Oh, okay,
at
so
least
you can
here,
do it.
is we may only have 2 or 3 kids at each level who need that. So
So we basically have to roll the dice, hire a teacher and try to bank on that teacher pulling enough kids back to
Pay for their
pay for their
salary.
salary, exactly. So, which we can absolutely explore and
We-
come back to you with.
Well-
We did do that synchronous learning during the shutdown
Yes, sir.
in order to stem to be competitive
The
so that
exodus.
they didn't all run to the charter cybers.
Yes, sir. We did a good job of it. They did a great
Yeah.
job, and I think we were able to circle the wagons a little bit, keep people in-house, but we lost a few, but not nearly as many as other districts.
and a lot of those kids who we were providing that service to came back into our buildings. It's not that a lot of those, when we quit, I mean, we ended that service, they all went to cyber school. They came back into our buildings as kind of the pandemic subsided.
How can we make our cyber more attractive?
A lot of ways. We can make it more attractive by offering synchronous instruction for sure. I mean, I think that appeals to some people. That requires staff, especially at the secondary level. Every subject that you want to teach, we need a teacher with a special certification. So in elementary, it's one teacher that can provide that instruction. Secondary level, that's a teacher per subject. So you're talking a minimum of 4 teachers, or 5 teachers just to offer the same kind of program.
But it wouldn't be, the history teacher wouldn't be there all day. He'd be there for.
Now, in theory, he could handle,
Yeah.
part.
My
part-time
concern is
equivalent.
that not only do we $200,000 more than last year, we're 400,000 less than more than next year. And, teacher cost is 150,000. And we're looking at, your projection is almost 500,000 in 2 years. So, if we can make it more attractive, have them participate, make sure they can participate in our extracurriculars and those kind of things. I think we need to do that.
The marketing,
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, but make it so that they, there's a carrot here for them to come back and stay with us. But if we turn around here and the way your projection goes, in 5 years we're spending another $1 million.
Do you have any interest in having any of your own current faculty getting certified
getting certified.
to be on synchronous learning on the cyber?
Oh, they are, just their certification allows them to teach synchronous instruction already. It's just
Okay.
a different vehicle for the way they do it. It's just a matter of freeing them up in our
With your schedule?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. It doesn't sound like you have too many easy options here.
No, there's nothing easy, but we're not afraid of work.
Right.
We'll look into it and we'll find out what we can do to attack it. And I think, Jared's planned to budget for the worst case scenario and we'll try to solve the solution, come up with a solution between now and then is the best approach.
Well, and we start now, we may be able to avoid some of Jerry's doomsday projections.
And I think, and I don't think it's all on us either. As we've said in the past, I think the funding, charter school
And all that's.
funding is broken and needs fixed at the state level,
And
which
it's not
is
gonna
what,
get fixed this year. or
It's
next
not.
year or the year after that, so.
No,
This is the game board we got to play on.
it is our problem to fix, but I just like to remind
The public.
the public that
They should contact their
it is not all on this school. It is a broken system. The funding side of it is certainly broken.
We're gonna send you to Harrisburg.
It needs
We
fixed.
actually are going to go to Harrisburg and advocate for that. We'll have a presence there and make sure that they hear from us because it's a tremendous expense and they charge what we charge to educate our children when they know that's not what it costs,
Right.
and
And
that's
they don't have
just
to disclose what they're
On
paying.
top of that,
Correct.
the success rate is dismal.
terrible.
And it just drives me crazy that we send them all like this cash, and they can't figure out how to teach the kid algebra.
No, if you look at the worst performing schools, so the 99% of the worst performing schools are cyber charter schools.
Well, and I think, I mean, I've just recently heard a lot of rumblings from different areas. But, we're all competing for teachers, and there's a teacher shortage right now. I can tell you, I've heard lately probably 5 or 6 public school teachers who next year are quitting their jobs and working for cyber schools because they can do it at home. They're going to make more money. They're going to have less responsibility, not see kids. Like, we are now going to start get to the point where
That's a good recommendation. I don't have to be around kids.
As a teacher.
That's
as a teacher, that's
fine.
so. But I've heard that more recently from different people I've known.
Teachers that are gonna retire or teachers that are gonna
No,
quit?
they not retire. They are going to quit their public school job to go to a cyber charter.
Yeah, and when you have $60 million in your reserve account, you can afford to pay
Yeah,
them another.
And
$10,000.
so they then lose their state retirement because they're now charter cyber?
Yeah.
No.
Not as long as they
Still-
taught 5 years.
They're all under pension now.
It's still PSERS pension.
They don't add anything to it though.
No,
At
they
this-
won't,
at the
it
cyber
won't keep
schools,
growing, but they don't lose it as long as they taught 5 years.
No, I think they're.
No,
they're
That's
some of the
what-
cybers participate in PSERS.
Oh, did they in Pacers? I didn't think they did.
They didn't, yeah, they didn't used to.
Well,
No.
then-
I don't want to
Yeah.
say for sure all of them, but you are approved at the PD level. Like if
Wow.
I know we recently had a teacher where my son goes to school, left, took a job at Commonwealth Connections, and I talked with her afterwards. She said the same thing. She gets her pension. She's part of PSERS. She
Protected
makes
by the
$70-some thousand a year doing
Yeah.
that.
I know,
Was
Doesn't have to
happy
do
with
bus
it.
duty.
And
Or
no
lunch
bus duty.
or.
I've heard 2 or 3 teachers at my home district who are going. My sister-in-law is considering it, and she said a bunch of other people that she knows are considering it. And she teaches out Harrisburg way, but I think that's the next thing that's come. The next problem that's public schools are going to face is we're now seriously going to be competing for just our teachers with them as well.
Well, we'll see if they like it. It's one thing to say you make more money. It's another thing if see if you actually like it. Is there a question?
Mike, I think, said something in there.
That's, so I'll read it to you as soon as I can figure out, bring it up.
No, it's just, Madam Vice President, I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks ago, the Auditor General released kind of like an attack on school boards and their fund balance, but he failed to do any audit of cyber
Yeah.
school. So the system's so broken, and I'm just trying to add more fuel to the fire that you guys already talked about and delineated, but it just makes no sense how they ignored all of the cyber schools and their fund balances, but then they attacked 11 schools in which they did. And then you see the need for it, the need for improving facilities, staffing, but look at the cyber costs continue to rise with the state not putting in more of their money. That's why schools have to continue to raise a fund balance.
Yeah, it's pretty alarming. I'm just not so sure these cybers won't blow up eventually. I'm not so sure. I don't have a lot of confidence in their operations. And they're heavily subsidized, let's face it. So if there's ever a consensus in Harrisburg that they don't want to support them, they're not going to have much to fall back on.
So, you said something, Rob, about going to advocate for the charter reform, going to Harrisburg to do that. Is there any thought on when that might happen, or?
I'm not sure. The PASA and other organizations organize legislative advocacy days from time to time. So any opportunity we get a chance, Mr. Vugovic is probably exhausted. Mr. Pittman and Mr. Struzzi probably hate to see him coming because they know what he's going to say. I mean, he's definitely beating that horse.
Well,
Well, they haven't done much.
I think their hands are tied in a lot of ways. A lot of these cyber charters are powerful.
I don't know if you guys remember the name
Oh, no.
Lawrence Feinberg. Lawrence Feinberg was a guy, he was a school board member in the eastern part of the state. And I can't remember what school district, but he did a daily summary, a daily Pennsylvania education summary, and he would email that out to school boards. He since became, I'm looking at his email now, he since became the director of the Keystone Center for Charter Change. And that is an organization in Pennsylvania whose his entire devotion is towards, making, these cyber school laws change. but I know they do regularly. I know Rob and I know Mike also is a part of Lawrence's emails, but they do every so often. They'll go to Harrisburg and they'll, organize something where school districts can participate.
What's
So
this called?
It's called and I can actually forward this to the board if you want to get on this. You just have to email him and you can get onto his email list.
Oh, yeah, we should.
Yeah.
What the heck? What's the
Um,
board? Is
so-
this worth it?
The reason I'm asking
Send
the
them a
question
donation.
is, and I recognize that the Charter Cybers are a powerful lobbying group. But we're now under this court decision that at some point in time, we've got to figure out how to read the fair funding. I would take the position that we need to go back to Pittman and Struzzi and to the governor, and when his representative Joel was here, we made that pitch that we should literally look at a comprehensive approach to this thing, which would include charter cyber. Are you going to do some sort of property tax relief? What percentage is the state going to pay? Is that going to change? My biggest fear is that that Harrisburg, in its infinite wisdom, will look at Indiana and say, well, your tax base can afford, you've not raised taxes for the last 5 years or 6 years. Your tax base can afford more. So we're going to knock $1 million out of yours to give it to one of these other districts where that sued, that says that they had unfair funding. And now we've got to raise the taxes, locally to make up the difference. And so my concern is I think we should not that we shouldn't continue to advocate for the charter cyber, but advocate for it also as a part of a bigger picture of what is the funding for the state going to actually look like, and what's charter's role and what's our role in Indiana.
Well, their hands are tied, yes, to a certain extent, but it is not a big deal to pass an amendment to the existing statute saying that they have to publish audit reports. Every last one of them. I mean, what the heck? Who doesn't have to get an audited report at a certain when you have so many employees? So there's a little bit of a. It's beginning to sound disingenuous when you see these numbers, particularly when you've seen what's happened post-pandemic. Although I do think, I've always felt that this synchronous learning has a real future, and somehow we'll have to, I think, try to figure it out. Yeah.
We've talked about it a few times now. We're putting a committee together to try to reach out to all of these families and have conversations with them about what they're being offered versus what they could be offered here. We just have to be smart about how we do it.
Yeah.
And we'll do that and we'll come back.
I mean, I would think we'd have to try to pilot a program before we would, instead of trying to jump in. But it seems to me, if you had, let's say you had like a strep throat go through to junior high, people can't come to classes and, you're quarantined or whatever. I don't know how they do it anymore for so long. To be able to offer, for the teachers to turn around and be able to pilot it to offer synchronous learning when so many are out. Maybe not for the normal time period, but enough that they can at least get some idea of what they've been missing. And that's a lot easier coming back bedraggled after you're sick. Speaking of these numbers, if we didn't do a reserve, it seems to me we would be pretty much okay here. But my question is on this new, because with the index going so high, it shows the depletion in a way of the tax base. So at least as I see it, it does. Because I remember my first year on the board, we were allowed to go to 2.7 or something, or 3.7. It was no more than that. So my question is, what would get us an additional? What's a mil now? 1.2 million, or about $1 million. So do you have any idea of what raising taxes by 1%, 2%? If you can send that to but you don't do it tonight. But I think we need to think about it.
Yeah, I can send that out to the board. I mean, yeah, this projection here for next year has the deficit at $4.5 million, which is a pretty serious deficit, much larger than we've had in many years. I think a big part of that is, part of that is fully putting in the contract employee contracts that we have settled. That implements, the AFSCME contract that is bringing back family health care come
Right.
January 1, that was approved. And we did a survey of all AFSCME people, because probably over half of our AFSCME employees now were hired when family health care was not an option to them. So we've done a survey to say, okay, come January 1, which health care are you going to take? So we have a pretty good idea of what that impact is going to look like when everybody has the option for family health care.
You have that in here?
That's
The
in that,
impact is
in
in
that
there.
projection, yes. Money has been put in for the family health care and then for the HSA contributions that come along with that family health care come January 1. And I'm not saying the family health care was a couple $100,000, which is going to cost the district. So it's not the main cause of this deficit. It certainly plays a role in it. The employee contracts, the 8% increase in healthcare as a
Tax
whole,
appeals.
the tax appeals, which is the other kind of chart that I gave the committee here, is attached to the agenda, just showing really what has happened to our district's assessed value over the past couple of years, really since almost directly after the reassessment in 2016. How we have been on we had a little bubble there, or a little bump for 2 years, but we've gone down the past, overall.
It was a bad, it's a shame. It's still a shame to this day. It's still a shame what happened on that. I don't think it was thoroughly thought through.
But in turn with, our
Ever.
assessed value going down pretty consistently over the past couple of years, so does our real estate tax revenue, which is this district's largest income line.
Well, they're our biggest donors, taxpayer. are our biggest
Yeah.
donors. So you'll get us some numbers on, it's it's pretty dramatic. It's pretty dramatic, to see it this way. Go ahead.
And so, the projection here on the revenue from the state is the same as we got this past year. We've not taken any consideration for what that might increase. And it's okay if you haven't, Jared.
No, I have, sir. It includes about a $400,000 increase in basic ed, which is our largest sum of money from the state, which the governor proposed giving us almost $900,000. So it takes about a little less than half of what he has projected, which is historically what we have gotten. When a governor proposes something, what they actually finally settle on is usually somewhere between 25 and 50%. So I kind of try to split that baby a little bit.
Okay.
So it does include both what he projected for increases in basic ed, special ed. It includes a little bit of money for an additional safety block grant that he proposes.
So the bottom line is that if the governor's budget were to come through to what he's proposing rather than historically, it's only going to have about a $500,000 difference then.
Yes, sir.
In that $4.5 million deficit.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But let's be prepared.
No, Julia, I understand.
No, you're right. I just
I
think
mean,
with,
we've not been afraid to face a $2 million deficit.
no, I'm not. I
Okay.
realize that.
And so
But interest rates are
the
good.
purpose of my question was, okay, we're at 4.5. If the governor's budget comes through as forecasted, does that get us within striking range of that $2 million deficit? If it does, then it's perhaps a different
Different
decision.
game.
If it doesn't solve the problem and get us there, then that's a different issue.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We've got options, though. It's not as if we're not without options. So we'll have to decide later on. We'll delay that decision on the reserve for quite a while unless we hit the jackpot. Maybe some-
And I will put out I can send to the whole board some of the options. What does a 1% tax increase look like? What does a 2%? So I will send those probably tomorrow after our meeting. I can send those out for
And
everybody's consideration.
We've listed this $10,000 judgment against the district. Is that a series of judgments or what?
It is amount budgeted every year.
You just-
I want to
you
say
didn't-
typically what falls under an expense under that. It is not an expense that we absolutely have every year. Typically, and I'm not saying we haven't had it for the past couple of years, but typically what falls under there is a special ed judgment where maybe we have
Okay.
to, put money aside for a special ed agreement that a parent has won against the district.
And you're not expecting, do you feel that your medicals, all your medical and dental and all that stuff is pretty much where it's gonna be?
Yes, ma'am. Unless in the next couple months, we
Well-
have some really good months on our medical and the rate goes down. That is the ceiling. You know, the consortium that we are part of through Aaron in January sets the max amount, and that's what's budgeted here, so.
But you know, when you talk about from a macro sense, what's cost this district so much is the hospital business and the insurers being able to make huge hikes every year, which outcompetes us on any of our employee costs or anything else. It's just year in, year out, every year. I don't think you've ever had a time when there was no increase, have you? At least not since I've been here.
I think, and I have to pull up the history, probably 3 or 4 years ago, we had less than a 1%
Okay. good.
increase.
Can you show us those medical costs sometime when you have a free minute in your busy schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I would
I'd
say our
like to
medical
see-
costs have always
So that-
somewhat gone up. I mean, there's the history of the
I know ours have.
line 26, but I can get you a history of the kind of our rate increases over the past 10 years.
Let's take a look at that, because it may be possible to get a bigger consortium, develop one.
We're likely to see the property values continue to fall. The appraisals that they're doing, commercial appraisals, require them to do appraisals within a certain distance within the last 6 months. So things like in a mall selling is going to show up in everybody's appraisal. So people with bigger projects are going to bring those. There's no reason to think that that's going to level out anything.
So to that end, Tom, and I think it's pretty much indicated by the graph that Jared put together here. I'm wondering whether or not between Jared and Mike, we ought to put both the assessed value and the amount of local tax revenue on our website with maybe a 1 or 2 sentence about each of these two graphs to kind of explain in layman's terms what's happened and the impact that it's having on our budget. And I'm only saying 1 or 2 sentences. If it's 3 or 4 sentences, I don't care, but something that's, reasonably short and to the point. Because I think it's important that the taxpayers understand the bind that we're getting in part, as Tom said, about, the impact of the mall is now going to impact everything, including the direct impact that it has to the homeowner, because that commercial dollars aren't there at this point in time to help make up some of these differences.
And pray we don't have a recession, because there's still, we're still in that, not quite sure, which turns the whole game out of. I think the university's improving. I think you're seeing improvement, and I think it's going to rebound. It's like, how many years is it going to take?
If the
Well, they
number of,
dropped their tuition.
if the number of students that showed up at 11 o'clock Friday night in downtown
Is
Indiana
any indication?
is any indication, and all the other activities, nefarious and otherwise, that occurred, I would say that they are on the rebound.
Well, that place that got what is it, Copper Beach? They had so many kids in it, the ceiling went through. I heard that on the radio.
I don't know that it was Copper Beach, but the second floor wound up in the first floor.
Yeah, it was
Was
the
it
new
Copper
Copper Beach.
New, yeah.
Oh,
Goodness
Was it the
gracious.
second floor or was it the deck?
Second floor is what it keeps on saying.
Yeah, you saw the pictures of that.
I couldn't tell from the news. It
Up
looked like
above
the deck,
Martin's.
but they kept
It looked
saying,
like the deck was
they
still
kept
there.
saying the
Penn State
second, but
built
it was,
Martin's and
I-
Regency
I-
Mall,
Yeah,
it wasn't clear,
It was
but-
completely
where
packed.
the
I think it's
TJ Maxx's.
Yeah, no, where the market-
exceeded their occupancy.
Two-state construction.
huge. It's
Yeah.
not construction, it's only
Yeah.
designed for 40 pounds.
Up on the,
And
up
they
on
had-
Up on the
They
hill.
had people dancing on that floor,
Jumping.
jumping and.
So it-
The one video I saw, I mean, it was shoulder to shoulder.
drunk argue.
And it collapsed.
So it wasn't
How
just
do you get
static
that
load,
done?
it was also the dynamic load.
Oh, yeah,
Of course, yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I mean, if those were like 2x10s, 2x10s at 16, it takes a heck of a lot of.
Did I hear that right?
Somebody raise their hand or something? I heard a beep.
Terry raised.
Terry, go ahead. Any comments from the online folks? Go ahead.
Yeah. I agree, Walter. I think it'd be a good idea to educate everybody on, because that if you drew a slope on that graph of the assessed values, that's a steep decline. And then the other thing, Jared, just please answer yes or no. The salaries that we're still negotiating, the Act 93, was anything included in the 23-24 for that?
There is, sir. There's some money put in here for both Act 93 and confidential, which are the two agreements that aren't settled yet.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Ron? Anybody? I can't see this far.
Not at this time, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Somebody, you. Who's you? Oh, we are you.
That's us.
We are you.
We are you. And we are. Then that's me, Mike, and Randy are the other three people up there. So.
Okay, Rob, or anything else we want to bring up for the good of the order? Rob or Mike or whatever. Go ahead.
We'll have a more in-depth budget presentation at the April audit and finance. So I just wanted to get these, as soon as I had these done, numbers out to the board. So.
Well, we have some bright spots too. Okay, and let's hope our student achievements, but we have nice reserves. I still want to reserve money this year, but we'll see. I like reserving.
Well, there is part of this, the projection here, because the board voted 2 years ago in April when we were talking about the high school turf. There is at least a $200,000 transfer to capital reserve in this projection as is. So there's at least that amount that will, unless the board votes not to do it, voted 2 years ago.
Yeah,
transfer.
I just feel as though we ought to be disciplined enough in the minimum any year to put 300,000 away in the reserve. Any board should be that disciplined to figure out how to do it. It's not easy all the time, but nor is it rocket science. You just have to. Okay. Anything else? If not, hearing none, thank you.
Well, the only other item we have on here is the football.
Oh, the football. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Go ahead. Football jersey purchase discussion. Go ahead.
Yep, our athletic director, Mr. Rowan, came to me 2 weeks ago or so. Well, he had actually talked to me probably around January timeframe, discussing his rotation of jerseys. Really, since the pandemic and supply chains still haven't recovered, the way the major, your Nikes, your Under Armours do it is they basically open up a window. You know, we're going to make 1 million jerseys, get your orders in as soon as possible. We'll open it up to high schools, we'll open it up to colleges. You know, they do a rotating basis. So it isn't as easy anymore as when we're ready, we order and we get them in a couple months. There's windows of time that we have to order these things by. The football jerseys are next on the slate of the rotation. What we are asking is normally we would purchase them probably summertime. There is a window opening right now, but even when we do open that window, we'll be lucky to have them by fall. So what we are proposing is to allow us, as soon as the window opens, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, to place that order out of this year's money instead of next year's, because if we wait till July, we may not have a window open to do that. Plus, it's going to take many months to get the items here from what we're being told. So because it is not directly budgeted for, it is around an estimated $12,000 expenditure. There is some money this year budgeted, but not enough to cover that. So that's why we're coming to the audit and finance to be able to buy the whole, or at least put in a PO and order those jerseys right now.
I thought we carried some money to replace jerseys on
We
the
do.
7-year cycle.
We do. We have a cycle, and that's
So,
what's on the cycle right
Of the
now.
$12,000, how much is on that cycle?
There's probably about 6. What we would have done is ordered some this year and some next year.
So the football takes 2 years to get it done?
Probably with the amount, yes.
Okay, and this would only be varsity jerseys.
Yes.
Fancy.
Is that the actual price, or does that not include subsidy from the boosters? Is that what it costs and they don't fundraise for it?
That's what it costs. That's what the district provides.
Do we ever ask them to help with it?
Not that I know of.
And what do they have in their
Didn't the
budget?
band boosters help buy uniforms or something?
Yeah.
So I thought
They did not the
somebody-
last time. That was a conversation. I mean, now the band boosters it was $100 and some thousand is what we paid the last time for new band uniforms. And we certainly, I think we talked about it last year at this time about starting to have that conversation because we are nearing that window where, if so told, we will go back to the band boosters and start asking them to start fundraising for a portion of that. Because that was a conversation probably almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
When we ordered the band uniforms.
That's a lot bigger number for them, but they also last a lot longer than the football jerseys that get just tortured.
Yeah.
Do we have-
And so the jerseys that we're gonna order are the same style and design that we currently have, or is there a new style or design that the team is looking for?
I'm sure it's an update, an updated design. I would imagine it's pretty close. I haven't seen them.
I would think that it would be different.
Okay.
You know, because again, I'm assuming we're looking at uniforms that are a decade old or so.
Yeah, I do not. I could get back to the board as
Yeah,
to.
how old are the ones that we have now?
I thought the write-up did say that he worked with the one organization and did change some things.
If I can, let me pull up his email that
I hope Indians isn't on it. Just Indiana.
We can,
Yeah, I do too.
We should go Indiana.
Just Indiana,
we can make it say Indiana. I
Just
think
a
we can make that.
feather or whatever.
including the warm-up stuff. And the booster stuff.
The booster you can't do,
You
and
can't control the
showing
boosters.
false
That's all I've
advertising
ever
on the
known.
radio,
You
you
can't, they're
can't do,
untouchable.
but for us.
But I'd
we
like
could-
to know if they could give us $2,500 towards these jerseys.
Advertises for the little Indians.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Good luck.
I know.
I don't think that's
We
beyond
just need to
what
just
they probably
not
have.
listen to it. We just need to say Indiana.
What do they pay for exactly on that team?
what do they?
We didn't ask them for a contribution towards the turf. We've never asked them for anything, but I think it's about time we start asking the boosters for specific asks.
Yeah,
We'll
I'm
put
not
that
against
turf
that. I
down.
think we need to come up with a policy that's fair to all teams, so that the board.
Well, there's certain teams that are bigger than us that use more equipment. Tennis, you go over here, all you have to do is maybe pay a little rental fee and you can buy a racket anywhere at Walmart, and tennis outfits are,
Do we supply tennis outfits?
I don't
No.
know, but well, they did. Clara used to wear
No.
Indian.
Not
Okay,
the
so-
girls. Girls
There you
buy their
go.
own. I think they get the shirts.
I do think eventually we're going to have to tackle this business of athletic expenses because we still don't know, and I know we can't ask and all the rest of it, but we don't know what the boosters raise. We don't know what they're spending it on. The most insight I ever had was suddenly with the wrestlers several years ago. Well, we're buying these mats on our credit cards. Who knew?
Yeah, $1,200 or $12,000 a piece.
And they weren't insignificant, so I'm a little surprised that we have to spend $12,000 on shirts, and I don't know how long they last. But how much does it cost to wash them? Do we wash them after every game, or do the parents wash them?
We watched
I
them.
think we watched it.
Terry raised his hand, Julia.
Yeah, I think it does say in his email or his letter to us, explaining what he's doing. He said BSN Sports, in conjunction with BSN Sports, we have designed 6 white away uniforms. So, yeah, it'd probably be good if the board and the administration got a chance to see what they look like. And if anything changed, I guess.
Does anybody have an objection if we were to approach, have the athletic director approach to ask for a contribution towards this?
So the question I would ask Julia and Tom and Cinda is that we probably should have develop some sort of overall policy. If the girls' tennis only get their jerseys paid for, but football players get everything else, maybe there needs to be some policy that's more equitable, or that the district agrees to pay, and I'm just making a number up, 50% of the uniform costs or whatever, and then the rest, we should probably start that conversation, whether it's something that the athletic director should start, or whether it should start at one of the three committees here, I think is something that we should, if we're going to go where we're going to expect more from the boosters, then I think, again, we take this kind of comprehensive approach so that we treat everybody fair and square.
Do any of our sports run without having boosters?
Yes, some of our
I mean,
sports.
because I've
do
never
not.
heard of the rifle team boosters, or, I don't know.
Well, and all the more reason why we need to sit down and start conversations to figure out how that all works.
I was very impressed when the group for the outdoor classroom raised the kind of money that they raised. So I've always talked about a comprehensive group within the district, or an adjunct group that we would incorporate that would go out and do all school fundraising. Because Ron, I forget what your group raised.
Terry raised his hand also, Julia.
Okay, Terry, and then Ron Earhart, if you can remember that figure, I'd like to know, because it was impressive.
Yeah, I agree with you, Walter. I think we need a comprehensive plan. I know this was discussed in the past, and I think it's going to be a difficult thing to do. I think it's going to take months, if not a year or so. And I'd also be curious, if we do go down this path, of what some other districts do.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, I didn't hear. I'm.
You're breaking up, Ron.
Don't worry, I'll ask you later. Don't worry.
You got me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just,
I know Latrobe runs an outreach committee, and Latrobe School District, in that alone, they have over $1 million in their fund, where they have their own little board, and they give each teacher every year at least a stipend of $1,800 to buy stuff for their classroom out of it. And I was something I think on the outreach committee we need to start looking at doing. And then the other thing I think is, we talked before, we need to raise the rates up of these tickets for these events too. That would bring in more money for this stuff.
well, yeah, I think we review that. But I was curious. I was very impressed with what the outdoor classroom was able to raise from a group of not just parents, but from local community donors. Many of them were individual donors. What do you remember offhand what was raised?
Well, we're probably up over $60,000.
Yeah, see, it's impressive.
I can get you that figure, but I know we're probably well over 60,000.
Okay. All righty, thank you.
Sure.
Anything else?
There is a motion, and we don't have to take a motion tonight on the agenda to approve ordering of these uniforms if the board wants to wait.
I don't know how urgent it is.
How old are the uniforms?
That I'm not,
At least 6 years old. That's what he said. He's not sure exactly, but they're over 6 years old.
And if we don't order them now, then we can't order them until the next window opens,
yeah,
or?
but the way Nike and Under Armour or them are working is they open windows of a couple weeks, or only there. They'll only take so many uniforms to produce within a time period before they shut it off until they can make sure that they can produce them.
I'm willing to support it because you have to do it. There's no sense fussing around, I think. But as long as we have some assurances that we're going to work on these other discussions, because just what's it going to be next year? I mean, we had the guy from track come in last year, needs all this stuff for, I don't even remember what it was, but it ended up being about $30,000. We can't be cold slugged like that too much.
No, there was some track equipment last year that I think we held off another year and finally approved it this year.
Yeah. So that's my opinion. I think you ought to go ahead and put it up because.
Actually, to pile on with Julia's comment, this stuff's coming up. They should get this budget, but they should get these kind of things budgeted for us. So that, like we do with the capital projects, we should know a year in advance or more.
Yeah.
What it's going to take to run these programs.
And Tom, along that line, we budget so many dollars for curriculum updates. We budgeted so many dollars, I think, for instruments each year. So maybe there needs to be a line item, just so many dollars budgeted each year for athletic equipment or athletic uniforms or.
Well, and there is, but it's only $6,000, which is enough to buy shirts for the girls' tennis team, but not nearly enough to buy uniforms for the football team. So one of the problems, remember when we upped the money for the curriculum updates, because it was taking 2 and 3 years to get through the curriculum updates. So we may need to also revisit that budget number.
So I guess my point is, Jared, we maybe should go back to the athletic director and say to him that by January the 1st, he has to have a budget to you on what the equipment or uniforms, and I'm just making that date up, whatever you guys decide, so that it can be put into your budget for the next year.
Yeah.
$6,000 as a standalone item isn't enough, then rather than keep getting this, and I kind of agree, a lot of times this stuff comes to us and it's a kind of a surprise, but it's a crisis because, and I understand Nike and Under Armour, and I'm not complaining so much about that, but it seems like every time it comes, it's a crisis versus if there was a forethought.
Well, and that's the way that the track equipment came to us. People are going to get killed if we don't replace this track equipment tomorrow.
And I think there has to be
That's
some
unfair.
rule on,
We used it for
that
another
if you
year,
don't,
though.
you don't get jumped up on the
And
deferred
He just said
athletic
it got
list.
approved? I don't remember.
Unless you've got a
We
real
approved
good
it
reason
finally?
that something hit you. Know, I remember one time we went out and bought more computers
would vote
because
no.
there was a sale or something, and if we didn't get them now, okay, that's fine. But I had thought at the time last year that we should have known a little bit in advance. These things just don't fail overnight. So how bad is it that you're coming into a meeting and directly asking the board? I don't even know if that ask ever went through any of you.
No, never came to.
If they just came and sat here and like, okay, decide because we're having a problem. I don't
We had-
like
we
that
had a-
kind of
we
a
had an academic-
presentation.
We had an extracurricular meeting last week. This could have come to. And should have come to.
So I think we could sharpen it up.
No, I think.
We do it with the other things we need.
So tonight, are we ready to move forward or do you want to wait? Well,
I sent you all the design too, so you can look over it.
thank you.
I'm okay with the motion, Joey. I just looked at the mock-up uniform that Rob sent.
Okay. Anybody else? Cindy, do you want to move forward or do you want to wait?
It's fine. You can go.
Yeah, I mean, but again, with your overall comments, Julia, that we
You have to.
take the look at the bigger picture, what the role of the boosters is, what the budget process, so we know more in advance, and they run that more like a business than a crisis management.
Ron, so we'll work with Dan, make sure that we have a rotating budget, just like we do with the curriculum revisions, and
And then have him go to the coaches and say, who needs uniforms this year?
we'll develop a plan and
Okay? You know,
So one thing that's on the same note but different, what is our obligation to the lacrosse team this year? How much more is it this year than last year? Because we were phasing them in, giving them more and more.
That is something that we still need to talk about because we don't have, when we voted last year, it was just for an amount for 22-23. So
Oh, okay. I thought we had the long term. Okay.
I think Mike presented a long-term plan and an administrative suggestion, but the way it was voted on last year was just, here's their allocation for 12-13 to be discussed later. Any future allocation will be discussed later, so.
And
I-
is that future allocation guesstimated in this budget
There is some
projection?
money put in there, yes.
So I think with Tom's meeting his April meeting, we should probably have that brought up. And then it can be reviewed in Julia's committee later next month, because we're gonna run out of time and then it'll be a crisis.
Crisis management, we're good at.
The question will come up about how many of our boys and girls are playing in those teams, what their schedule was.
Well, let's,
Those kind of things would come up in my meeting, his meeting would come up.
But I think we have a pretty good idea of what we're thinking before we go into these committee meetings, if it's some sort of a target where you realistically think we can get. So it's a different budget concept. It's kind of like what's realistic relative to whether it's other school districts, whether it's realistic to the history we've seen in the past. I mean, if the number is going to be 200,000 a year, then we need to know whatever the number is. If it's 50,000, if whatever it is, and then we have something to aim for, and we can say, okay, well, how can we manipulate the number if possible?
Are you talking
with
just
the
lacrosse?
sensible policies? No, with everything.
With everything?
Okay, anything else? Okay, I don't think there's anything else on the agenda, is there? No.
No.
All right, thank you, Jared, very much. Appreciate it. Rob, thank you. Mike?
So we're about time to start the executive.
Excuse me.